Now it's time for us to make our blueberry filling. I have here 1 cup of blueberries, to which I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup of sugar. And what I'm going to do is melt the sugar over very low heat. And what's going to happen is the juice of the blueberries and the sugar, it will melt and it will start to come to the simmer. What I'm going to try to do is combine this completely. When this is completely melted and liquid, and when it is simmering, I have over there at the table 3 tablespoons of cornstarch that I've mixed with 3 tablespoons of water, and I'm going to empty this entire mixture into there, and then I'm going to return that entire mixture here and cook that until it thickens and becomes clear. In the meantime, while this is waiting and while this is melting, I'm going to actually prepare 2 tablespoons of butter. Which is going to go into the filling at the very end of this. Now, I probably should have taken this out a little sooner because this has to be at room temperature, but it will melt. And I gotta make sure this is exactly 2 tablespoons. By the time this gets cooked and the time it thickens and everything else, this will be at room temperature enough, because this is going to go into the filling at the very, very, very end. There we go. Cut them into small pieces, and then what will happen is when you put this into the hot blueberry mixture, it will melt immediately. Apparently, why this happens is I think it's supposed to bring out the flavor of the fruit. For some reason it does that. It also is a textural thing, why to use the butter. It does some great textural things. Okay, I'm going to put that back in the refrigerator. And okay, I'm going to have to stir this up a little bit because it's starting to cook. We want to let that sugar get completely melted, and it's going to draw out the natural juices of the blueberries, and it's going to start to simmer a little bit. And when that happens, just when it starts to do that, it starts to exude more of its juice. The sugar will bring out the juices. And when that happens, that's when we will combine it. But we're going to have to wait until the sugar is completely melted. What I'm trying to do is trying to make sure that all these berries get completely immersed in the sugar, and make sure that the sugar is completely melted. It takes a little time, but it's definitely worth it. See, there it goes. Starting to simmer a little bit. If you find that the heat gets too hot, by all means, turn the heat down if you have to. This actually isn't the pot that I wanted to do this in. But, well, too late now. This is the pot I'm using, so there we are. Sugar is almost completely melted, as you can see. I was going to do this in another pot, but this will do just as fine. This is exactly what I wanted to have happen. So you see it's come to the boil. But we want to make sure that sugar is completely melted before we go on to the next step. See, I'm stirring this. I'm going to turn this down a little bit. I think this might be a little too high. There we go. Low heat. That's good. That's very, very good. Perfect. There we go. See? All right, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this, which is now simmering completely, and we're going to combine this with our cornstarch mixture here, which seems to have hardened up for some reason. So we're just going to put this in very, very, very gradually, and it's going to soften the cornstarch mixture. There you see. This is the whole basis for this. If a little sugar gets clinging to the bottom, don't worry about it. Okay, then we're going to switch to the wooden spoon. We're going to stir this up a little bit. There we go. There, you see. It liquefied that. We're going to stir this up, and then what we're going to do is we're going to return all of this right back to the pan that we were cooking in before. And here it is. This is going to go right back in here, and we're going to cook this on the stove until it thickens. It's going to come to the boil, it's going to thicken, and it's going to become completely clear, and that's when we go to the next step beyond that. There we go. All right, so we're going to return this to the stove, keeping it over the low heat, and we're going to have to be very, very patient. We cannot rush this. So we're going to just keep stirring this and stirring this, and what will happen is that that melted sugar in the bottom will probably melt enough that it'll end up into this. And it's going to start to come to the boil, and it's going to thicken, and it's going to become very, very, very transparent and clear. And then when that happens, we then proceed to the next step. But you have to stir it constantly. If you do not do this, it's going to burn. You do not want that to happen. And from the looks of it, I think it's going to turn pretty soon. From the looks of it. But I have it on very low heat, because if it cooks too fast, then what can happen is that it can thin out on you and never thicken at all. It's very hard to predict just how long this is going to take. My best answer for that is just keep stirring it until it does thicken, and it does take a little time. Main thing is to keep stirring it. When it does thicken, it's going to kind of like almost film the pan, because don't forget this is cornstarch, and that's the main thickener that's being used here. It gets very, very, very thick. And I can already feel that a lot of the sugar that had clung to this before has already melted into some of the mixture. That's good. That's what we want to have happen. But I'm not going to fool with this, and I'm not going to turn the heat up, because I don't want this to thin out. Because if it thins out, then you're going to be in really big trouble. But this was really hot when I added it, so I think it's not going to take that long for it to thicken, but sometimes it does. You just have to be very patient. You just have to keep going. It's still not quite there yet, but it's getting there. What'll happen is it'll start to come to the boil, and when it does start to come to the boil, you'll see it start to come together. It's pretty, isn't it?
Beautiful.
It would be even prettier if it thickened, and I don't know why it's not thickening. It does up. I think it's starting to now. It's just now starting to thicken. It's not quite there yet, but it certainly will be. It has to be thickened to the point that it actually starts to almost film the pan. Cornstarch does that, you see. If you don't do this, then it won't thicken properly when you bake it. I'm going to turn this up a little because I think I have it too low. There, I think that should do it now. I had it too low. That's why it was taking so long. I turned it up just a little bit. Still at low heat, but now it's not quite, but it's just, it has to come to the boil. And it hasn't come to the boil yet. Because when it does come to the boil, it's going to thicken. And when it thickens, it's really going to get very, very thick. And it's going to get clear. Almost. Yep, starting to boil now. It won't be long now. It'll be very soon before it really starts to get to that texture that we're looking for. Yep, almost. See what it's doing now?
Beautiful.
Yep, it's almost there. I just want to make sure it gets super, super thick and it starts to actually almost, see, it's starting to almost, I want some of that cornstarch to kind of like evaporate, and once it does, then we'll be exactly where we need to be with this. It should be completely clear and completely thick. It's just not really happening. Almost though. There, now there we go. That's what we want. Almost there. There we go. There, you see? That's what we want.